This happened about 4 years ago. I'm now 21 years old and no longer live in that neighborhood. Yesterday, while visiting my parents, I happened to meet my former neighbor, and it refreshed my memories of the incident. Let me tell you a story. I live in a third world country and our neighborhood is considered one of the poorest, but only from an outsider's perspective. Despite this, we socialize and support each other. Even people who have previously served prison sentences usually turn out to be friendly. There are many people with mental health issues living in our neighborhood, and Happy is one of them. My mom and I have nicknamed him Happy, since his name literally translates to happy, and we always jokingly ask him, "Oh, Happy, are you really happy?" He has a smile playing on his face all the time unless someone alarms him, which thankfully is extremely rare, only a few times a year. I've lived in this house for almost 19 years, so Happy has become very familiar to me. He lives with his two brothers. One of them works as a fruit seller and the other makes a living as a cab driver. Happy does not have a stable job because of his mental disorder, and I speculate that it could be a subform of schizophrenia, but I am not sure exactly. All I know is that his mental state is different from normal, so it's impossible to have normal conversations with him about sports, news, or anything else. His phrases just don't make sense. It should also be noted that mental health issues are rather neglected in our country, as there are only 3 specialized institutions for such people for the whole country. Due to this, Happy does not have access to adequate medical care, and people just call him crazy. Truly sad. My father used to be close to him and his brothers, but now they don't socialize. My dad used to help Happy by giving him some money to buy cigarettes. He knew that Happy's brother, a cab driver, had to support his 2 children in another town, and his other brother, who was a fruit vendor, didn't earn too much. Happy would help carry groceries from time to time, and my father would often give him some money as a token of his gratitude. So, from my childhood, I only remember him as a very helpful and friendly person. Always when we met, I would smile at him, and he would smile back too. However, when I turned 15 years old, Happy changed. The smile stayed on his face, and he would spend whole days outside in different places just smoking. I would wake up around 7 in the morning to go to school, and he was always already there, awake and just smoking. It seemed like he either didn't sleep at all or he woke up too early. This man was familiar to us. He was always in a certain place that could be reached by car in half an hour. I wonder how much time he spent on the road on foot. There was concern at the sight of him, but mostly he just stood there and smoked. This behavior of his continued from morning until late at night. Over time, however, his manner changed, which caught my attention. He began to stare at me intently, with a confused and fearful smile on his face. Every time I passed by him, he maintained this gaze without turning his head. Sometimes he would step back and pull himself against the wall as if he were hiding or something like that. His behavior underwent a significant change. He became more often angry, shouted something indignantly, and quickly walked away in the direction of his house. I will now tell you what really happened to me. As mentioned, he never took his eyes off me. I was 17 years old, and that day I was alone at home. My relatives had gone out, and he must have known I was alone, because as they were leaving, I saw him standing in his usual place watching them leave. During lunch, I decided to go grocery shopping. I noticed that he was standing next to his brother, who was selling fruit at the local market. I went to the market to get vegetables and meat. The vegetables were not far from Happy House, and the butcher shop was a minute walk from there. As I paid for the meat and put it in my bag, I looked up and found him looking at me. I didn't hesitate to turn right and walk home, but he was behind me again. But I didn't pay much attention to it because our houses were right next to each other. As I passed his house, I expected him to stop. But no, he was still following me. I looked back, and his awful smile continued to follow me. Not taking his behavior seriously, I thought he was just heading to his usual place to stand and smoke a cigarette or something. I never thought of him as someone who could cause danger in our neighborhood, so I didn't worry much even when he lost his temper. I walked through the main door from the street and down a wide hallway where only one door belonged to an elderly woman. As I passed her door, I turned right and went up the stairs to the 2nd floor where my house was located. Suddenly, I heard someone enter through the main door, and I assumed it was probably one of the neighbors from the 3rd floor. The footsteps were hurried, and it seemed to me that they were rushing somewhere. I turned to look down the stairs and give way for them to make a quick ascent. To my surprise, however, there was Happy at the bottom of the stairs. I suddenly froze and my heart began to beat harder. I asked him what he was doing here, but he silently rushed toward me, moving 2 steps at a time. I tried to get up faster, but he grabbed my leg and I fell, slipping. My right arm and knee hurt badly from hitting the floor. He dragged me down the stairs, hurting my back in the process. But thanks to adrenaline, I started kicking his legs, trying to free myself from his grip and screaming for him to let go of me. I also yelled for help, hoping the neighbors would hear me and come to my aid. With my free foot, I kicked him in the forearm, hoping he would let me go. I kept kicking and shaking my other leg. Finally, I was able to free myself. However, I couldn't turn around, so I started climbing up the stairs, fearing that he would follow me into the house and who knows what he might do once inside. I just aimed to kick him, hoping he would lose his balance and fall down the stairs so I could enter my house. I kicked and screamed, but it was all to no avail. It seemed like a long time passed, but it was probably only about 5 seconds. And then I heard the old lady's door downstairs start to open. Happy heard this and immediately ran away as he passed her house. But she spotted him and called my name, asking if I was okay. Poking her head out from under the stairs, she kept calling my name, but I was too scared and exhausted to answer. Blood was dripping from my elbow and all I could do was cry out in fear and pain. She insisted that I go into her house and let her help me stop the bleeding. I told her I could do it myself, but she persisted and kept calling me to come downstairs. Finally, I ignored my fear, climbed the stairs with difficulty, and went into my room. After an hour or so, I pulled myself together and felt a little calmer, then cautiously made my way to the old lady's house. I knocked on the door and she opened it. I asked her not to tell anyone about what had happened because my dad could punish the huppy a lot if he found out the truth. I explained that he had a problem with his head, and I didn't want my father to put him in jail for his underdevelopment. She promised not to tell my family, and it was over. Over the next 2 years, Happy changed again, but this time he wouldn't even look me in the eye. He would purposely turn around and walk the other way when we met on the street. For the first few months, I was afraid that he might be waiting for me around the corner or somewhere else, but it turned out that he was just avoiding me to keep out of sight. Even after I moved out, he continued to avoid seeing me. 4 years have passed, but he still doesn't look in my direction. My only hope is that Happy stays peaceful and doesn't hurt other people in our neighborhood. But most of all, I want people to be aware of mental illness and be able to get the treatment and help they need. People like Happy really need that. This story happened a few years ago when I was living with my ex-boyfriend. We moved into a new 2-bedroom house and got busy settling in. We decided to turn one of the bedrooms into an office so people wouldn't have to go through our bedroom to get to the bathroom. We often had friends over for sleepovers on the couch, and we didn't feel comfortable having them go through our private room. About a month after we moved in, my ex left with coworkers, and I was left home alone. In the evening, I was watching TV and eating dinner when I heard strange noises several times, but each time I tried to figure out what was going on, the noise stopped. It was getting late, so I decided to go up to the 2nd floor and work on my computer before I went to bed. Our phone was on prepaid and there was no more money on it to call. I was left all alone in the house, and for my sleep I chose a back room with a small table lamp that emitted only a faint light. However, as I started typing on my laptop, strange sounds came to my ears again. At first it was a barely audible creaking rustling, so fragile that I had to try hard to make sure it wasn't a figment of my imagination. I turned off the music and turned to face the front door of our bedroom, but there was no one in sight. However, when I went back to the back room, I found that it was hard to see anything out the window from there. Our yard was small and surrounded by a high brick wall, and there was complete darkness around the wooden gate. In my opinion, there was nothing going on even in the backyard. Returning to my work, I turned on the music again. About 10 minutes had passed when I heard a creaking sound, similar to the sound of steel surfaces colliding. The sound was just as quiet, as if its source was constantly trying to remain unnoticed. Soon, I felt alarmed and left the bedroom to retrieve a heavy iron bar found in the depths of the closet. I decided not to turn on the lights as I did not know what was going on. and did not want a possible intruder to know of my whereabouts. It should be remembered that I had no way to call anyone, and I was beginning to worry about the presence of intruders in my home. Back in the study of the back room, I quietly closed the door, locked it, and placed a chair under the handle. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. I began to feel silly about my excitement. I thought that perhaps it was all because of my first time being alone in the house. This time, however, I decided not to turn on the music. And with that, I did the right thing, because a few minutes later I heard the whispering of two male voices. Luckily, the voices were not like the ones inside the house. The window of the study was slightly ajar, and it seemed to me that the source of the sounds was there. I headed to the bathroom to get a better look at the backyard. The study and bathroom formed an L-shaped fence around the yard, with the bathroom facing even farther out. Climbing onto the ledge, I slowly opened the window to peer into the alley. Nothing was visible, but the whispering had gotten noticeably louder and was coming directly from the gate. Although I couldn't make out the entire conversation, I heard enough to get the gist of it. These guys found out about our move and realized that we had valuable possessions. Guitars, computers, my DSLR, TV, game consoles, and more. The thought occurred to me that they probably realized I was home alone. They waited for me to fall asleep so they could then try to break into the house. I continued to hold on to the ledge, a seemingly safe place, until I heard a loud bang. It sounded like they had stopped hiding and were now trying to break through the gate. I could see them shaking from their violent thrusts and could only imagine how great they were. I'm a young girl, short in stature, about 160 centimeters, and at the time I was hanging about 58 pounds. So it was eerie for me to stare at the gate, struggling to steady myself on my feet. I held the iron bar tightly while looking for a place where I could hide from them. Suddenly, a bright light flashed behind me. At first I was frightened and hid, believing they were using the flashlight at the back of the house. But then I heard dogs barking and people yelling. I looked again and saw the light fill the house across the alley, illuminating their yard. As I snapped the bathroom shut, I heard a noise, and only seconds later, two quick footsteps were moved in the alley. Left alone, locked in, I awaited the return of my companion who, invariably returning home fully intoxicated, had confirmed his presence to me that night at 4 a.m. Lack of sleep that night was my unenviable companion. The next morning, on going out into the yard, I found that my gate was barely hanging on its hinges, and anyone who wished to enter could easily get in through the alley. Examining the keyhole on the back of the gate, I noticed that it was scratched, as if someone had tried to break the lock. Had it not been for the warning of my neighbors, much of what had happened behind me would have reared its head. These events unfolded in the summer of 1998, while my home was in Boston. It had been a particularly rainy summer, and the water element hitting the city caused a lot of flooding. The first one occurred on a Saturday night when I was out with my friends. As we were rushing around in brightly colored cars, the downpour happened in an onslaught. I was in the back seat and suddenly noticed the headlights of passing cars illuminating a figure moving along the curb. As far as my eyes could discern, it was an elderly man who was wearing a white fitted t-shirt and light-colored pants. He was carrying something with him, although I was vaguely aware of it all, for the windows were blurred from the rain, and there were water droplets everywhere. I shared my observations with my friends, marveling that someone was walking on the side of the road on such a horrible night. It was expected that a person stuck on the side of the road on such a night would be noticed by a car with its emergency lights on, but nothing happened. I forgot about this incident until one evening when I was returning home during a rainstorm traveling on the same road. What did my eye happen to catch? Amazingly, the same person, wearing the same clothes, walking along the side of the road. There was no sign of accidents that could explain his presence on the highway. An urge was born in me to turn around and investigate this mysterious figure. This experience was repeated several times throughout the summer. It occurred not only during the mass bike rides, but also on Route 495 as well as Route 2. It didn't matter if I had friends on my company or not. I was the only person who saw this man. Moreover, he only appeared when it was raining. I couldn't understand why all this was happening. There were no bad events or any encounters in my family that year. Everything is normal when viewed through the prism of ordinary events, but I began to lean toward the idea that all these incidents were some kind of warning. However, what it could have meant I never realized, and I still don't know why it happened and why I was the only one who saw this stranger.